All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining this Thursday meeting of the Election Law Subcommittee. Today is Campaign Finance Day, so we have several campaign finance bills that we're going to go over to potentially move forward. So let's take a look at those. I'm calling the meeting to order as well. Let's start with House Bill 1350 that's on the agenda. This bill allows the treasurer of a campaign finance entity to approve instead of make all of the disbursements for the entity. It also requires a campaign finance entity that is liable for a civil penalty to submit bank statements during a particular period, which can be waived by SBE. Is there any discussion, comments, or concerns about this one? This was one that was unanimous last year in the committee and in the House. Delia Shoemaker.
So what is the story with the bank statement provision?
Sure. So for a
What's that do?
campaign, yeah, great question. So for a campaign that is sort of an egregious actor in terms of continuously having issues with their campaign finance, and if they are issued a civil liability, like a penalty from SBE, they can be required to submit their bank statements. So there can be more detailed information about their transactions that SBE can look at.
Okay.
Their campaign finance bank statements, of course.
Yeah, right. Okay. Gotcha.
Yes. Any other comments, questions? Delia Lasanti.
Fingers are not moving that quickly. Sorry. just a quick observation about this bill, because I think one of the most important pieces of this is that the expenditures, if I understand it correctly, the expenditures can be made by the campaign entity as opposed to by the treasurer. So I think that makes the law contemporary, because not all expenditures are actually made by the treasurer themselves. Very often committees have, I mean, if you went on and purchased something like online or something, it may actually not be made by the treasurer, but it provides the accuracy of it being approved. Is that?
Exactly. It just
Okay.
brings it more into what actually takes place and what's realistic in terms of campaign.
What people are doing. Absolutely.
Right. And it includes the approval of the treasurer. So
Right.
it's not to say that anyone should just be going wild and making any purchase. It should be, of course, subject to the approval of the treasurer. So that language stays in there.
Yep. That's a very important piece, I think.
Yes. Do I have a motion on this bill?
Move favorable.
Second.
All right. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Thank you. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor of House Bill 1350 raise your hands. All right, any opposed? Okay, House Bill 1350 moves forward favorably. Okay, 1351. 1351 requires a campaign finance entity to initiate the transfer of a contribution that's made through a third-party payment processor. So again, this is perhaps your PayPal, your Venmo, your Cash App, to initiate that transfer within 7 days after the third-party processor deposits those funds. And this is a bill that came through committee unanimously last year. Any discussion before we take a formal motion? Questions, considerations? Delia Shoemaker.
I see in the amendments, there's language about imposing a civil penalty.
Yes, thank you, Delia Shoemaker. Sometimes I don't mention the amendments. So Appreciate that. So the amendments, yes, it ensures that there's an actual enforcement mechanism. As we discussed in the last bill, there are several, civil penalties and violations and things like that. This was not included as one of them. So the amendment just ensures that can be a civil penalty if it's violated.
But just to follow up on that. So who gets assessed the civil penalty? Is it the campaign entity or is it the Venmo or Anecdote or whoever the case may be, the third party process?
Right. So what the bill is saying is that the campaign, when those funds are deposited into your PayPal, for example, that the campaign, if PayPal is not automatically moving it into your bank account, that you as the campaign must make sure that those funds are moved over within 7 days so that people are just not acquiring all kinds of money transactions in a third party account. So it would be the campaign that's responsible and the campaign that would be in violation and liable.
But, what happens if the third party processor is just lax or whatever, or
Right.
hold on to the money and the campaign entity is asking for the transfer and, they're not forthcoming with the transfer?
That's not how these third party entities work. You click a couple buttons and transfer it over to the account. Whether you're using PayPal, those are the most popular ones, PayPal, Venmo, Cash App. You click and you transfer it over. It's a manual thing that the campaign or the person has to do.
Okay.
So it's within 7 days after that money's deposited into your PayPal, then you click and say, I want to transfer it into my bank account.
All right. I'm not hip to all that stuff, so that's why I asked. So.
Sure. I totally understand. Delegate Long.
I've noticed it happened in one of my campaigns, we raised funds, and we didn't notice that we had money in the bank. It was a small donation, and supposedly they had emailed us and notified us to go in and transfer it over. My concerns is what if that happens again? I'm just curious, if you get a donation and you're not aware of it and 7 days run out, now what do you do?
So you're saying, Delegate Long, that it's happened to you before where you had a donation, like you had a third party processor like a PayPal or another service, and you had a donation that you weren't aware of?
Right.
So I think the best course of action would be to either make sure you're getting alerts when a deposit is made, or you or your treasurer just checking maybe once a week, maybe every Monday or Sunday or something, you just double check. But I think in high campaign season, we're probably paying more attention to our funds and doing more fundraising during that time. So I would say either double check it, or you can get alerts on your phone from the processor that you're using that tells you, hey, you have a donation that came in or funds that were deposited in there.
Okay. Thank you.
And so the purpose of this bill is just really to ensure we are required to have an official campaign finance bank account. And so we all need to be on the same page about making sure that the third party processor isn't just holding, funds in that account, because where we should be dispersing our funds and our main account has to be our campaign finance account.
Thank you.
Sure. All right. We can do further discussion, but why don't we go ahead and take a motion on this?
Move favorable.
Second.
Thank you, Delegate Jones. Thank you, Delegate Feldmark. It's been moved and seconded.
Is this the amendment?
On the amendment, yes, thank you, Stan. So on the amendment, moved and seconded. Any discussion on the amendments? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of the amendments, raise your hand. Any opposed? All right, we've added the amendments to the bill. On the bill as amended. Motion.
Favorable.
Second.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion on the bill as amended? Okay, hearing none. On the bill as amended, all those in favor? Raise your hand. Any opposed? And we have no abstention. So we moved this bill forward, favorable with amendments. Okay, our last campaign finance bill, HB 1352, campaign finance reports business contributors. This bill requires SDAT to electronically share with SBE by January 15th each year, the information about businesses that are registered in the state and those that have also forfeited their business registration in the state, so that SBE can have more information around business contributions for auditing purposes. Mr. Demarinis, is there anything that you can just tell us about more about this bill and how it would work?
Sure, Chair. Basically, we're going to work with SDAT here. They are going to provide us with information regarding businesses that have been forfeited their license. And this is a very specific term of art with SDAT. This is not like a business that said failed to pay their taxes or has some sort of, I would say, lien against them. These are businesses, according to SDAT, that are no longer doing business in the state of Maryland. And as such, the question then becomes, why are they making contributions if they're basically have shut their doors? And so this by getting this information from them with that in hand, then we can maybe do a little bit more on auditing of the account, whether they were in business like prior to the contribution, or if it was afterwards, or if there was any sort of untoward contributions here, or the ability to kind of maybe circumvent the law or contribution limits that the state prosecutor could use. So this is basically another tool in the toolbox for enforcement and making sure that businesses that give contributions are legitimate business entities.
Okay, I see Delegate Shoemaker, but really quickly, Stan, did you have anything to add in terms of background?
No, actually.
Okay, perfect. All right, Delegate Shoemaker.
I'm assuming, based on what you were saying, Jared, is that this would also include business entities whose charters have lapsed by virtue of the fact that they didn't pay their $300 annual fee to SDAT.
So, Chair, if you don't mind, I'll
Yes.
Yeah. So, yes. So SDAT, in order for the ones that fail to do the $300, like they have procedures to make sure that it's not automatically forfeited, and that's why we went to the forfeit status rather than registration, failure to file, or any of those other statuses. This is their most extreme status, and I think if anything before this, the business could still operate and pay penalties. This is kind of like they're done aspect of it, and that's why when crafting this with SDAT, that was the term that we wanted to make sure we didn't be over inclusive with businesses that are operating and can still make legitimate contributions, but say owe penalties to SDAT or late fees. This is kind of excluding those.
Okay.
I think for businesses that Jared was describing that are not completely in compliance but are not defunct, I think the term is not in good standing.
Thank you.
Right.
Yeah. I drew a mental blank on that one there. Thank you, sir.
That's the term of art. Yeah.
Yes.
Delegate Long.
What about businesses that are located outside of the state of Maryland?
So those are not basically a part of this because SSTAT only does businesses that do business in the state of Maryland. If it's a California or an Illinois business that never does business in the state of Maryland, they have the right to do that. This is just to shore up contributions with entities that do business in the state.
Thank you.
Delegate Feldmark.
And so just to clarify, this is not changing any of the regulations around who's allowed to make a contribution. This is simply sort of making sure we have better information to accurately investigate and enforce the existing regs. Is that correct?
Yes, I would say, right, all the businesses, it doesn't change their status. They can still give $6,000 for the election year. This is just businesses that may be questionable. Now we have a little bit more information in order to audit that procedure against that business entity.
Can I just a quick follow-up, Madam Chair? So this is to better equip us with compliance enforcement?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Any other questions or considerations? All right. I don't believe we had any amendments on this one. No. Okay. Can I take a motion?
Move favorable.
All right.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Any additional discussion on HB 1352? All right. Hearing none. All those in favor of HB 1352, raise your hand. All right. All those opposed? Okay, we have 2 opposed. The ayes have it, and we are moving forward favorably with HB 1352. Okay, that's it for the campaign finance bills.
Okay.
Now we are going to move on to a personal favorite of mine, House Bill 222, dealing with the Value My Vote Act. This is the bill which we previously discussed that deals with ensuring that the rights of those who are incarcerated, who, as we know, many of which have the right to vote, to create a very specific process to ensure this right. Those who are in jail with misdemeanors and also those who are pretrial have the right to vote, and as much of the right to vote as we do. And so the intent of this bill is to tighten up our processes around that. There were further amendments to the bill, and we sent the reprint out to you. So in case you haven't had a chance to look, you might want to pull it up in your email now, and hopefully I'm looking at the right version. Was someone saying something? Oh, okay. The spirit of these amendments is that I have been connecting with corrections since the start of the session about the bill to make sure that it was, reasonable and something that they're able to implement and work with SBE on. So we did receive some feedback from them and made additional changes to the bill with that feedback in mind. So some of that includes ensuring, let me start from the top. So that includes removing the sections about election related mail so that we can simplify the process for corrections and that they don't have to manage separate election mail. We also ensured safety in terms of having the ombudsman that will be kind of overseeing the process. We just ensured that corrections can designate in terms of safety, they can restrict the ombudsman from certain areas of the jail and things like that. Let me see what other notable changes were made since our last discussion. Oh, we also, per corrections request, we made it so that the incarcerated individual would directly submit their ballot in the drop box as opposed to an employee submitting it. So that was a change that we made. And we also streamlined the requirements around signage, so that, we want to ensure that the information around the right to vote is around, posted at intake and at parole during release, and also in appropriate high visibility areas, but we streamlined that language in the bill. So those were some of the major changes since we last discussed it. Again, trying to find some middle ground. Are there any questions or considerations from the members? Delegate Shoemaker.
Who, if anybody, pays for the ombudsman?
Right.
The state.
Are they going to,
Delegate Long.
are they going to have to be specially trained, and will that be their specific job? Will it be a
Yes,
paid
yes,
position?
right. Yes, Delegate Long. And the idea behind that, colleagues, is that during the 2020 election, there was a strong effort to ensure that our incarcerated individuals got the information around how to vote. And one of the challenges that we saw was that the lack of having sort of an outside person who can help provide information, help be sort of like a clearinghouse, help work with SBE and corrections around implementing was just a challenge. And so this is to ensure that, since we have many correctional facilities all across the state, that there's sort of one person who is there and able to oversee the process. So that's the reason for the ombudsman. Delegate Feldmark.
And just to clarify, the ombudsman is employed by the State Board of Elections, not by the department. Correct.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Delegate Lasanti.
Question. Will the ombudsman also, I assume that they will also be able to help an incarcerated person determine their help with their which ballot they use, if they have changed their residency? I mean, are they, how does that work?
Yeah, that's a good
And if
question.
someone is incarcerated for a long period of time, will they be able to help them navigate that?
Yes, and
So that they get the right ballot? If they're
Right.
still, I mean, if they, wherever their residency is, because I think without an ombudsman, that would be very complicated.
Exactly. And so being sort of an extension of SBE and able to help navigate that, because usually an incarcerated individual would be registered and would vote at where they intend
Their home,
long-term, right, exactly,
is.
yes. And so, as you can imagine, that those types of questions and clarifications and things like that, we want to make sure that every facility is clear on all of the information and sharing correct information, and that there is someone there to answer and navigate those sorts of things. So yes, absolutely, the ombudsman would be able to help with those things and provide
Thank you.
support to the correctional facilities.
Right.
Delegate Long.
I have a question. If they're incarcerated for 2 years, would their mailing address, or would they vote in the precinct, or polling place? Yeah, in the area where they're being held? That'd be
They
their
would.
polling-
Mhm.
I'm sorry.
In Maryland, and when someone registers to vote, our residency is where you intend your long-term stay and where your home is. So usually for an incarcerated person, especially someone serving a misdemeanor, which is a shorter term, it's usually their home address.
Right,
Where
but
they-
anybody, right, so anybody that's being incarcerated for, let's say a year, minimum of a year. So that would, the address of where they're being incarcerated would be their mailing address? Or that would
In
be
terms
where
of
they-
their-
I'm sorry, where they be voting, what district they'd be voting in?
Usually it'd be their home address, their final destination, where they actually have lived.
Okay, thank you.
Delia Lasanti, or was that from before? Oh, okay. How about we do a motion on the amendments and then we can discuss the bill as amended?
Move favorable.
Thank you. A second?
Second.
Thank you. It's been properly moved and seconded. Any further discussion on the amendments? All right, hearing none. All those in favor of the amendments to House Bill 222, raise your hand. All right, any opposed? All right, the amendments have been added. Now on House Bill 222 as amended.
Move favorable.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and properly seconded. Any further discussion on House Bill 222 as amended? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of House Bill 222 as amended, raise your hand. All right, any opposed? All right, the bill carries, the motion carries, the bill carries, and House Bill 222 has been moved out favorable with amendments through our committee. That, I believe, ends the work at the desk. And great work and great questions as usual. We will meet again next week, probably early in the week, so that given that it's going to be crossover week next week, to consider further bills. Are there any announcements or anything anyone wants to share before we jump off?
I
Delia,
would
what?
like to special order all the other bills that we have not considered.
A lot of people might be mad.
All right, see you guys. Thanks.
Thank you, guys. See you later.
Be in 15 minutes.